Nigeria's Presidential Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms Committee has denied claims that the Nigeria Tax Act 2025 imposes a 25% tax on building materials, construction payments, or bank transactions, describing the assertions as false and misleading. Now, before we get into this, let's take a look at that particular video where the former Minister of Transportation, Rotimi Amaechi, was making this claim.
APC will implement the tax law. The tax law is if I pay you 100 million naira for your building materials, automatically 25 million will leave your account. If you say it's a lie, take my statement to your lawyer. Tell your lawyer, give me the tax law and explain it to me. I'm a lawyer. The moment you pay, I come here, you give me building materials, you say it's 100 million, you say it's 20, if you say 20 million, if I pay you 20 million, Tinubu will collect 2.5. If you say it's 500,000 naira, Tinubu will collect, no, you will collect 2,500. 25% of every payment you get will go to the federal government. Okay, so let's even leave that. How does it affect everybody? It doesn't affect you alone. How does it affect everybody? If I come and I'm a landlord and I'm building a house, you charge me 25% because you won't bear it alone. You transfer it to the person who bought it. I will go and put 25% on the rent. If the rent, the man who rented the house is a doctor, to treat you, he will do what? If he's a carpenter, what will he do? You see, I don't even mind the tax. What I mind is that even after the tax, the money goes into private pocket.
All right, there you have it. That video, of course, is what the committee has responded to. And to speak on this, I have Chidi Okorafor, Legal and Compliance Officer at Copen Group. Thank you so much, Chidi, for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you, Petra. Good to have you.
Same here. I believe you saw that particular video where, Rotimi Amaechi was saying, speaking to an audience about the tax law. What's your reading of that?
So, Petra, there's a problem, and I will just have to make this clear as much as possible. You see, it is both disappointing and unbelievable that we could be getting such information from a possible presidential aspirant. If things goes the way Amaechi wants it, he may fly the ticket of ADC, and it is completely wrong that we are getting, before you can criticize anything, you need to understand that very well. You don't need to even be a tax expert before you can understand that that representation does not in any way communicate, connote what the Tax Act, the current tax regime is all about, right? He said that there is now property tax of 25%. And the analogy he gave is so unacceptable because he said, if you buy building materials from a dealer and then maybe to the tune of 100 million, 25% of that money goes to the federal government. First, that's not how tax law works, right? That is not how tax law works. How does tax law work? When you have assembled all your income or revenues from various sources, then you do what we call deductions. The deductions that are allowed by the law. You deduct it one after the other, right? The expenses you incurred wholly and exclusively for the purpose of that transaction. When you are done with that deduction, you arrive at what we call taxable income. It is that taxable income that you are now going to administer the 30%, as the case may be, the 25%, even the 25% is no longer operating under the new tax regime. So the simple thing I can say, as far as completely dangerous, and I'm using my terms carefully, in that it is very deceptive and does not in any way represent what the tax law says. I understand the campaign, right? I understand that 2027 is here. It's almost here. I understand the fight, the urge to do everything possible to unseat the present administration. I'm not campaigning for APC or ADC, but the point I'm making is clear.
Okay.
If you want to criticize any concept, you need to understand that concept first. So it is not true. That is not the provision for the...
All right, let's move on from that. I mean, he might not be doing all that for himself. Maybe it's just for the party. He might have, someone he's supporting for that role. But away from that, the committee has responded, and I would like us to break, the sections the committee alluded to into three. There is that speaks to, tenants and workers, developers and landlords, and there is the one that speaks to investors and landlords, investors and companies, beg your pardon. Now, let's begin with tenants and landlords. What reliefs, are there in that regard in the Nigeria Tax Act?
That is the point. Now, one of the, like I mentioned before, if you want to tax any person, you need to determine the entire income of that person. Then when you are done, you now begin to do the deductions, allowable deductions under the law. One of the allowable deductions that this law now provides for is what we call rent relief. And that is contained in section 20 of that is for personal income tax, section 20 of the NTA, the Nigeria Tax Act. And it says that you are now allowed to deduct 20%, right? 20% of your rent as a tax relief, rent relief. And what that means is this: if you are staying in a property where you pay rent of 2 million naira every year, then the tax law now allows you to deduct 20% of that amount, which is 400,000. It is now allowable deduction for the purpose of determining your tax liability as a taxpayer in Nigeria, right? That is the first one. Now, issue of whether VAT is applicable to rent has also been laid to rest. Before now, we had decided cases, some of them conflicting themselves, but now Section 185 sub paragraph L has now provided that VAT is no longer applicable to rent. So when you are not paying your rent as a tenant in Nigeria, it is no longer for the landlord to now ask you to pay VAT of the amount of rent you are being charged, right? So even when you even engage in what we call lease, which is a tenancy that is in excess of 3 years, right? If the amount you are paying for the purpose of that lease is not up to 10 million or is not more than 10 million, you are also exempted from what we call stamp duty, which is the amount of money you pay to register the agreement that reflects that lease transaction.
All right. Thank you so much, Chidi Okorafor. I wish we could, go on and talk about this, because this is something many Nigerians would definitely like to hear and understand. Chidi Okorafor, Legal and Compliance Officer, Copen Group, thank you so much for coming on the show today and for sharing your thoughts with us.